If you haven't already watched our previous video on how we designed, laid out, and CNC machined the sign components, please check that out. The link for that video is going to be in the description below. Now in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to show you how we install and set up the LEDs, how we install the mounting hardware, how we put the acrylic backer on, and how we wired everything up, and finally had a final installation on the wall. So stay tuned and we're going to walk you through this step by step. Okay, we're going to start off with some of the materials that I'm using for these signs. The first thing that I'm using is LED strips. They're 12-volt LEDs. They're flexible. There's about 16 feet or so on a tape reel. I got them on Amazon for $8.99. It was cool. Prime delivery. I got them next day. My suggestion is do not get the LEDs that are waterproof, because they have like a clear rubber coating over the LEDs and over the electronics part of the strip. Unless your sign is going to be used outdoors, I would recommend just getting the plain LED strips, because when you have a letter that you have to bend them around a corner, it just works better. These are more flexible and easier to handle. And also when you have to, like on this letter E project, when you have to splice on part of the letter for the center of the E, it's easier to solder these. You don't have to clear away the clear plastic from it. So that's my recommendation. So you're looking at about $9 or so for the LEDs. Now to power the LEDs, you need a power supply. I found this one on Amazon. It's 60 watt, 12 volt power supply. The entire strip of the 16 feet of LEDs is about 18 watts. So you have plenty of extra power with this power supply for probably 3 or 4 reels, or 3 or 4 strips of 16 feet. This particular project used just over, maybe a foot over the 16 feet. So I was plenty fine with this power supply. Let's see, the next thing we needed was a timer. Because my sign is at a part of the building where I don't have a switch for the power, the easiest thing for us to do was to put a timer on it. So we set this timer to go on at about 8 o'clock in the morning and off around 6 at night, and then it doesn't turn on the weekends. For 12 bucks, 13 bucks, this is a great timer. We use a few of them in our facility to take care of lights and stuff. So that's my recommendation. I'll have links for all these things down below as well. The threaded inserts, as I showed you in the other video, I'm using Easy Locks. These are 832 flanged. They come in a pack of 100 for 7 bucks. You really can't go wrong with that. So I was really happy with these, and again, I was able to get them next day, which was awesome. For the threaded rods, I couldn't find anything on Amazon that I wouldn't have to cut. So I went to McMaster Carr, and they have these low strength steel threaded rods. I was able to get them. They come in a variety of lengths. They're 832 threads. I was able to get them 2 inches long, which is what I wanted. And the cost for these was, I don't know, I think right around $9 or so for a pack of 50. So it wasn't very expensive. And now I had plenty for this sign and some left over for future projects. I painted the PVC on the sign with Krylon Color Max. It's a deep gray. That's what I ended up using. It's a paint and primer in one. It works good on the PVC. I had no issues with it at all. I used a whole, well, not even a whole can, maybe half the can for the entire sign. So for $4 there, really not that bad. So total in material costs here, I've got right around 50 bucks. And that's actually an inflated number, because I bought things that were in packs of 100, packs of 50, and I didn't need that many. So if you actually strip all that out, I'm at about maybe $30 or so in total materials so far for this. The PVC that I had was a scrap left over, so I don't really have a cost associated with it. It was just a piece that I decided not to throw away. And the acrylic that I used was about $16, and that's for a whole sheet, which I believe was 36 inches by 24 inches. So That's really not that expensive either, and I still have a bunch left over for future signs. Okay, the first thing we need to do here is we are going to take the PVC letter and we're going to start to measure out the LED tape strip and see how much length we need. When we come to a corner, you can actually pinch it and make a slight fold to give you a 90-degree angle change. So we're going to do that in both ends of the E. Now you don't want to pinch it and completely press it together because you run the risk of breaking the contact, but you can fold it quite a bit. So once we have the whole thing measured where we want, then we'll sit it in, make sure it fits well, and then we'll take a pair of cutters and we're going to go ahead and cut it. Now, we always try to cut them right in the center of the contacts, so if you need to, you can always fold it back a little. Now, in the center of the E, we have to put a strip to come straight out. So we're going to measure and cut a small strip LED tape, and we're going to fit that in there. Now we'll take, just for ease of soldering, we'll take the LED strip completely out and remove the letter for a minute, and we'll grab some wire that we have and we're going to strip it. This is just wire that we had left over from a cable that we use in our machine, but the actual wires inside the cable are perfect size for what we need to do here. Again, remember, on this particular little strip, all we're doing is powering 3 little LED lights, so there's hardly any current at all going through them. So the next thing we'll do is strip the wire and tin the ends, and then we'll make a jumper that goes from the actual main strip, the outside strip, and we'll have 2 jumpers that'll go over and connect to a contact in the middle. Now, it's important to make sure that you keep positive to positive and negative to negative on these, and it is marked on the surface of the LED tape. Also, when you go ahead and you solder this, don't use a super high temperature, and if you don't have a temperature control on your soldering pen, then just make sure that you tin the tip of your soldering iron. As soon as it hits the copper, it's immediately going to transfer to that. And you don't need a lot of solder because the contacts are pretty close together. So right here, we're going to tin the tip slightly, and we tin the wire so the wire has solder on it. And then all we need to do now is add a little bit of solder to each of the contacts. You don't need a lot. You just need a little bit, just so that the copper is coated. And then you could just simply solder the wire directly onto the contact. Now what we need to do is make sure that we put the LED strip back in, because we have to see how long we need to cut these wires. Because the contacts on the LED strip may not be right in the same position where you need the second strip. So once you have an idea of how long you need to be, you can trim the wires, and then we'll go ahead and we'll strip those, tin them, and then we'll solder the ends of these wires to the little strip for the center of the letter E. And then tin the copper connectors on the little LED strip. And now all we have to do is just simply solder the wires onto the LED strip, making sure positive and negative are in the right position. Sometimes it's easier to take the LED strip out of the letter and work right on the bench. Now we have to tin the contacts on one end of the LED strip, and this is where the cable is going to go that we're going to run into the wall to connect to the power supply. So we're going to use the same cable. We're just going to restrip the ends and then solder them right onto the end of the LED strip. Now, it's important to make sure that you solder the cable on the LED strip in a place that's close to where one of the threaded studs are. And the reason for that is because you've got 2 studs coming out of the back of the letter into the wall, and you're going to have the wire go alongside. And just for aesthetics, it's really easier to make sure that you run the wire right next to one of the threaded rods that goes into the wall. And it just looks cleaner. And if you had to, if you were sticking out quite a bit, you could use a zip tie too to hold the wire to the actual threaded rod. So when you do that, just kind of plan for which contacts you're going to use on the LED strip based on where in the letter you want the wire to come out. Now, of course, every letter will be a little bit different. Sometimes you may have to grab a contact that's not exactly at the end in order to get the wire where you need it. So now we can just peel the adhesive cover that's off the back of the LED strip. Now remember, these are LED tape, which is cool. So you don't really have to do anything other than peel it off. It's got adhesive on it, which you can stick right in place. So just use your finger to push the adhesive down and carefully work the LED strip around the inside of the letter until it's fastened down. Now the reason that we use the channel in this letter is you want to make sure that the LED strip is a little bit, at least a ½ inch away from the acrylic. And what will happen is that causes it to diffuse a little bit better. If the LED strip is right on the back side of the acrylic, you're going to get a hot spot, and I wanted the light to wash out more on the wall. And so by moving the LED strip a little bit further away from the back side of the acrylic, you're going to get a nicer diffused light. And so that's why we did the pocket at roughly a ½ inch on this. So now we've got everything in. We're just going to use our finger, push down one more time, and the LEDs are all set, ready to put the acrylic on. One manual thing that I need to do here is I have to drill a hole for the wire to exit the plastic. Now that I know exactly where I want the wire to exit, I'm going to drill a hole. Now, if you plan ahead of time and you figure this out, you can actually have the machine put the holes in. But on this particular example, I wasn't sure exactly where I wanted it. So now I'm just going to use a regular hand drill and put a hole in for the wire. Now that the hole is drilled, I can thread the cable through the hole I just made in the acrylic. This is again the cable that's going to go through the wall into the power supply. And just double check that the fit of the acrylic, everything lines up and snaps together. Looks good. Everything fits perfectly. So now what we need to do next is take the acrylic back off, and we've got to put in the threaded inserts and the threaded rods. Now, using an Allen driver, we can install the threaded rods into the 2 holes that we made in the back of the letter. You don't have to force them in, just put them in so that they're snug. Okay, now we can insert the 832 threaded rods into the threaded inserts so they stick out the back of the acrylic, and that's what's actually going to get pushed into the wall to fasten the letters. Now we'll put the acrylic back over, make sure everything lines up still. And we'll snap it back into place. Make sure that the wire is tucked down so it doesn't get pinched. Looks good. Everything fits nicely. So I need some flanged lock nuts that I can use to both hold the acrylic down and then use as a standoff on the wall for the threaded rod. So I went back to McMaster-Carr and picked up some zinc-plated 832 thread size nuts. They're about $4 for a pack of 100. So we're going to need 4 for this letter. It's actually 4 for each letter as long as you have 2 threaded rods. So the first one, you're going to put the nut on flange down, and that's going to actually hold the acrylic tight against the PVC plastic. Then once that's tight, you only need to hand tighten them too. That's the other thing. I don't use a wrench because you don't want to risk cracking the acrylic. You just need to snug it up. The second nut will go on flange side up, and that's actually what's going to be the standoff. That's going to set the gap between the back of the letter and the surface of the wall. So we're going to get them close. Then we're going to grab a tape measure And we're going to measure you could do this with calipers as well. And we're just going to measure the gap between the acrylic and the nut. And we'll do it on both of them and make sure that they're the same distance away. So the next thing I'm doing here is I put an attachment on my CNC so I can use a plotting pen, and I rolled out some paper. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to plot out the vectors outlines of the sign. And what this will do is this will give me a full-scale representation of what the sign will look like on the wall. And it'll also give me the hole locations, so I'll be able to take this template and tape it to the wall, make sure it's leveled and centered where I want it, and then all I need to do at that point is transfer the holes using a drill into the wall, and I'll be able to push the letters in at that point. So this is going to go ahead, here's the light bulb, and then after the light bulb is done, it'll start printing out the letters as well. But now you can see the holes going in. These are the mounting holes. This is a great attachment. This is a great way to set up a template when you're doing these type of signs, because one of the hardest things is making sure that all the letters are in the right spot, spaced evenly, and all straight and level. So this works out excellent. Now if you don't have a plotting pen capability on your CNC, you could take a piece of thin plywood and either a V-bit or a small 16th inch end mill, and you can pocket out an outline of it in the plywood. So you'll basically be doing the same thing but with an end mill. And you can put the locations in where the holes are going to be and just transfer those into the wall. It'll make this process a lot easier and give you perfect results every time. One thing you can see in this clip is there is a horizontal line running right down the middle, and then a vertical line that goes through like where the A and the E are. Those are lines I put in to make sure the vertical line is to show the center, so I can make sure that this template is centered on the wall. And the horizontal line is what I'll put a level against to make sure that the letters are perfectly level on the wall. So here I have the template taped on the wall. I have a vertical piece of masking tape that I marked my center line so I can align the template left to right. And then I'll put a level on the line that goes horizontally across to make sure everything is level from that point. So the next thing I need to do is to drill the holes right in the center of all the marks on my template. I chose a drill bit that is one size smaller than the diameter of the 832 threaded rod. And the reason for that is you want to make sure that when you push the letter into the wall through the hole, that the serrated edges on the threaded rod are, for lack of a better term, they're sawing kind of the wall, and it's putting pressure on the letter to hold it securely in place. With letters this small, you shouldn't have to use any adhesive. However, if you are using bigger letters, you may want to put some adhesive in the hole and then go ahead and set the letters into them. So here's what the holes look like after I remove the template. Now keep in mind, what I'm showing you here is for installation into drywall. If you're installing into concrete, plaster, stone, any other material other than drywall, the suggestion would be to make the holes slightly larger than the threaded rod, and definitely use adhesive. Just put some adhesive in the hole and then push the letter in with the threaded rods, and that'll hold it in place. So undersizing the hole for drywall, oversizing the hole for any other material. So now what we need to do is drill an additional hole in the wall, which will line up where the wire is going to go. So again, because we put the holes in for the wire into the back of the acrylic after we machined it, we have to basically place the hole in the wall where we're going to snake the wire through. Now again, if we planned ahead of time where you wanted the wire hole to be, we could have transferred that to the template as well, and we could have drilled that hole through the template. So this particular way wasn't a big deal. We were just trying to figure out the best way to run all the wires, because we had to avoid some metal studs and other obstacles that were in the wall. So this worked out good for us, but again, if you plan accordingly, you could put that in the actual layout. Okay, now we can go ahead and just push every letter into the wall, setting the threaded rods, and run the wire through. So in this case, what we did was we ran all of the wires through the wall. We had to pull some insulation out behind the drywall and actually cut a hole above the ceiling to reach inside. And we were able to pull each wire over the suspended ceiling tiles and hanging out in the front like you see here. So now what we'll do is we'll strip all the wires, and we're going to go ahead and connect all the ends together, positives to positives, negatives to negatives, and then connect a terminal and hook it up to the power supply. The power supply is going to end up going in the ceiling above one of the tiles, and that will plug into the timer, which will also go into the ceiling. And in this ceiling, in this building, there happens to be a 110 volt outlet that we're able to plug the timer into, so you don't actually have to, you don't see it. It's up there. So the only problem with that is twice a year we have to go in and just change for daylight savings time, but that's okay. It's easier than running a whole new electric circuit or running the wire somewhere else in the building. And here it is. This is the final sign. It's all plugged in and lit up. It came out really good. I was really happy. Everything was spaced perfectly. The letters fit in. They're nice and solid. All the wiring is tucked away in the ceiling so you can't see it. It's a very clean installation. The LEDs that we used were plenty bright, so even with the lights on in the office, you could still see the reflection and the drop shadow on the wall. I really was happy with the way that the light bulb came out. That was a lot of work because each of the rays on the light bulb had to have an individual LED strip on it, and the wire for each of those had to get run into the main part of the bulb, and the threads on the bulb, the 4 blocks there, each had to have a LED in it. So there was a lot of work on the light bulb to get that done, but the process was exactly the same as it was with the letter E that I showed you in this. So here it is with the lights off in the office, and you can see it really glows up nice with the lights off. So all in all, very excited about this project. I was happy to be able to put this video together. I hope everybody finds it helpful. This was a little cumbersome to put together because there was a lot of pieces and parts, and I didn't necessarily have video for every single step, so I tried to include some photographs and at least explain everything that we were doing so you could better understand. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And please, as always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please do so that next time we post a video, you can be notified of it. Thank you very much for watching.